Good morning, everybody. I will now call this meeting to order. Welcome to the 2023-2025 Nevada Sentencing Commission. I am Victoria Gonzalez, the Executive Director from the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy. This commission is housed in our department, and we assist the commission in carrying out its activities and duties. Because we are in a new meeting cycle, we do not officially have a chair elected yet. I will be presiding until the chair is elected. As the Executive Secretary, I will now take the role. Chief Bays, Dr. Bradley,
Present.
Chairman Dorico,
Here.
Director Zarinda,
Here.
Deputy Chief Evans,
Present.
Judge Freeman, Ms. Grosnick,
Present.
Mr. Hazibullah, DA Hicks, Mr. Hoffman,
Present.
DA Jackson, Deputy Director Jordan,
Present.
Judge Jones, Mr. Katsky,
Here.
Dr. Lanterman, Mr. McCormick,
Present.
Ms. Mull, Ms. Murray,
Present.
Mr. Ponder, Director Schmidt, Ms. Suzayamas,
Present.
Assemblyman Ortlicker,
Here.
Senator Canizaro, Senator Gokachia, Ms. Brady,
Present.
Chief Justice Stiglitz.
Here.
I will note for the record that we do have a quorum. I will now open Agenda Item 2, the first period of public comment. There are two periods of public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end. For today's meeting, members of the public have two options for submitting public comment. First, members of the public may do so in writing by emailing the Department of Sentencing Policy at sentencingpolicy@ndsp.nv.gov. Public comment received in writing will be provided to the Commission and be included by reference in the meeting minutes. The second is speaking in person. Due to time constraints, in-person public comment will be limited to 2 minutes. If there is any public comment either here in Carson City or Las Vegas, please make your way to the table. For those who come to the table to testify, please make sure you hit the microphone button and speak clearly into the microphone. Let us please start here in Carson City. Not seeing anybody in Carson City, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to make public comment? Thank you. BPS, is there anybody on the line wishing to make public comment?
Thank you, ma'am. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Seeing no more public comment, I will now close Agenda Item 2. Moving on to Agenda Item 3. Members of the Commission have been provided copies of the minutes from the June 30th, 2023 meeting. Are there any edits, comments, or corrections? Hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 30th, 2023 meeting.
John McCormick, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Lydia Stiglitz with a second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. Motion passes. I will now open Agenda Item 4, election of the chair and vice chair of the Nevada Sentencing Commission. At this time, I will now entertain a nomination for election of the chair of the Nevada Sentencing Commission.
This is Christine Jones Brady for the record. I would like to nominate Judge Stiglitz.
Thank you. I have a nomination for Ms. Brady nominating Chief Justice Stiglitz as chair. Do I have a second?
This is Jennifer Lanterman. I second.
I have Dr. Lanterman as a second. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion, the nomination? Seeing none, I will now entertain a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
Aye.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Chair Stiglitz. I will now turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Commission. I'll now entertain a nomination for the election of the Vice Chair of the Nevada Sentencing Commission.
This is Aaron Evans. For the record, I would nominate Dr. Shira Bradley for Vice Chair.
Thank you. I have a nomination of Dr. Bradley. Is there a second? All right. Without a second, that nomination fails. Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
This is.
We need one.
This is Chris Rico. I'd like to nominate Miss Jones Brady.
All right, have nomination of Ms. Jones Brady. Is there a second on that motion?
Troy Jordan, for the record, I'll second it.
All right, we have a nomination and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, there's a delay. All those opposed say nay. All right, congratulations to Chair Jones Brady, Vice Chair Jones Brady. We are now officially on our way to the 2023-2025 meeting cycle. I'll now close this agenda item and we'll turn to item 5. Interviews of the candidates for the position of Executive Director of the Department of Sentencing Policy. The Director has some notes and updates on the candidates, and I will now turn the time over to her.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we've had a few candidates. I want to give you some updates on some of the candidates. So working in alphabetical order. So Tammy Bass has withdrawn her application. Adam Burkholder has also withdrawn his application. And for applicant 5D, Malachi Collin, that candidate is not available to appear for an interview today, but still wanted their application considered. So that leaves us with 7 candidates to interview today.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Director. That means we have 7 candidates to consider. We'll proceed as follows. Each candidate's interview will be allotted time of no more than 20 minutes. The 20 minutes includes the 3 to 5 minute statement the candidate will provide at the beginning of the interview. This means we'll have about 15 to 17 minutes for questions. The candidates are currently being sequestered in a separate room and do not have access to view the meeting. We will interview the candidates in the order they're listed on the agenda, alphabetically. Staff will escort each candidate back and forth from the committee room when it is their turn. Do any members of the commission have any questions? All right, hearing none, seeing none, let's proceed. I'll ask staff to get the first candidate. Good morning, Mrs. Cafferata. How are you today? All right.
Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. Hey, thank you for your interest in the position and showing a willingness to participate in a public interview. We'll have you proceed with your 3 to 5 minute statement, and then the commission is free to ask any questions they may have related to your application.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, and for those who don't know me, I'm Patty Cafferata. My current position is Chief Appellate Deputy for the State Public Defender's Office. I looked at the qualifications for this position and sort of grouped them into several areas. One is criminal justice, which I've been the district attorney of Lincoln, Lander, and Esmeralda counties at different times. So prosecuted defendants, and I served on the assembly, and I was on the Judiciary Committee, so one of the things that we were responsible for was all the laws that have to do with criminal the criminal justice system and the courts. So in that capacity, I visited a lot of the prisons here over the years in my other jobs. I have visited Ely, Lovelock, one of the prisons in Las Vegas. I've visited some honor camps, and I visited the federal prison in Nye County. So I am familiar with the prison system. One of the other requirements is liaison to legislature, governor, judiciary. So I've served in the legislature. I know many of the legislators, both parties, the leadership. I've interviewed some of them to write articles for the Nevada Lawyers magazine, which is our official bar publication. I know the governor. I know many of the people that he are on his staff that I have worked with over the years. The judges, I've clerked for Judge Dave Gamble in the 9th Judicial District in Douglas County, and Connie Steinheimer in the 2nd Judicial District Court. I know all the judges on the Nevada Supreme Court, except for the newest, Patricia Lee, who was just recently appointed. I do know the judges on the appellate court, and I know many of the district court judges. I have actually appeared in all the judicial districts in the state of Nevada, either on criminal matters or on civil matters, and I've also appeared at the Nevada Supreme Court. The third area was administrator. When I was the state treasurer, I ran the agency. There were 9 of us. That included me, small group, but you know about state government, the budgets, the personnel management, budgeting, all the things that go with running an agency. As a district attorney, of course, I ran small agencies. One, I had only one other employee, and one I had 4 or 5 employees. That was the largest that I administered. As the ED of the Ethics Commission, I also ran that government agency, and again, that was a small agency. We had 5 employees. And I'm also, of course, familiar with the open meeting law because as a district attorney, you are advising all the elected officials, and then, of course, if you're an ED of the Ethics Commission, you're arranging meetings, and you have to comply with the open meeting law. And then I think finally, when I worked for Attorney General Adam Laxalt, I did all the outreach to law enforcement, the counties and municipalities, so I have a working relationship with the people across the state. I arranged the law enforcement summits every year. I was the ED of the Tech Crimes Advisory Board, and I coordinated the Substance Abuse Working Group. We had a opioid abuse summit that I arranged, and I was the ED of the Advisory Council to the Prosecuting Attorneys, which is the district attorneys. I arranged their trainings once a year and worked with all of them. I also supervised the Domestic Violence Ombudsman and all of those meetings that are coordinated. So that's a quick summary of my, not to take too long. So anyway, happy to answer questions. Thank you for the interview. I appreciate being here.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cafferata, and thank you for your distinguished service to the state of Nevada. I'll now turn this over to my colleagues for any questions they may have.
Evelyn Grosnick with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about any experience that you have with data collection and analysis?
Data collection and analysis. As compiling information, no, I do not have any. But I love your website. I was really impressed. You have everything. All the trends, it's really, who's ever done it has been very good.
Thank you.
I'm going to encourage any members with questions jump in, state your name first. It's one thing about Zoom, it's easier for me to kind of manage the floor, and right now, it's not so easy. So just, if you have a question, state your name and ask your question.
Jim Hoffman. Sorry. Jim Hoffman. My question is, what sort of capacity do you see the state, the Department of Sentencing Policy, not currently having that you think would be a good thing to try and build with this job?
So I've looked at some of your minutes, and it seems like there's a lot of discussion about the role of the commission and what you can do. Not having worked in the agency, anything specific, I couldn't answer that. But I think it's an important role. The last time I was really involved, there were about 13,000 inmates in our prison system, and now there are 10, and I don't know whether, 10,000, I don't know whether that's because of COVID or because of policies, but I think you have to balance both sides, the prosecutors, the defenders, and create a policy that probably has to be done by the legislature as to what changes you're going to make.
Michelle Bays for the record, and just for a second here, do you need to note that I arrived late? I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure I was.
Let the record reflect. Let the record reflect that Chief Bays is here.
And Ms. Cafferetta, I wanted to echo that. Thank you for your distinguished service. And to follow up on Ms. Grosnick's question, maybe not the actual data analysis and collection yourself, but managing it, and you maybe speak on some experience you had in either directing others or just collecting and then directing that analysis at an administrative level.
So one of the things that I didn't mention was for the Attorney General, we did all the investigation of the rape kits back to 1985 that had not been tested, and by the time that was a separate committee that the Attorney General just set up, and my duty was to, one, coordinate that committee, but first thing we had to do was find out where all the rape kits were, and there were like 7,000 of them in the state, and Nevada was not unique, let me just say that. Most states and some cities had large backlogs that just people had not realized that if you had tested it and you knew, they were serial offenders. So one of the things we did, I did personally do this. I did call all the sheriffs and say, tell me how many rape kits you have in your evidence vaults, and what are the dates and so forth. So we collected all that data, worked with Metro and with the Washoe Crime Lab, and ultimately by the time we were done, those last rape kits were tested about 4 or 5 months after Adam left office. So I do know how to do that.
Christine Jones Brady for the record. Good morning.
Good morning, Christine.
As a state, what are some of our largest challenges that you see with regard to sentencing, probation, reentry? What are some of our biggest challenges in that area?
I think the biggest challenges right now that I've observed in the public defender's office is the amount of mental health issues and the amount of drugs, people on drugs. What do you do with them? Where do you place them? How do you protect society? I don't think we have enough mental health institutions or programs. So that has been the biggest shock to me, has been the mental health issue in the criminal justice system.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Cafferata? All right, hearing none, seeing none. Ms. Cafferata, any final words you'd like to say today?
Please vote for me and send my name to the governor.
All right, thank you again.
Thanks for Thanks for the time.
All right. Good morning. Yeah, if you just sit in the center right there, it's the hot seat.
The hot
Touch
seat?
it.
Well, at least it's already been warmed up for me.
All right, good morning. Are you Miss Elowen?
Eloyen.
Eloyen, hi, welcome. Thank you for your interest in the position and agreeing to come participate in a public interview here today. We're going to have you proceed with about 3 to 5 minute opening statement, and then the commission is going to ask questions. We're limiting each candidate to about 20 minutes total. So want to get answers to all the questions the commission members may have.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity and the invitation to interview. Up until recently, I didn't even know a position like this existed. So when reading the position description and the job description, I feel like this was really a great conglomerate of all of the things that I enjoyed most in the positions and the experience that I've had before. I really am excited to be able to apply what I've done and what I've learned in both, my education and in work experience. And I'm sure you guys have read my CV, that you guys know my extensive experience within the criminal justice system. But I also feel like I bring a unique quality to that with having the psychology background and being a forensic psychologist. I've had the opportunity to work in almost every setting in the criminal justice system, from juvenile probation to working with sex offenders on parole, working in 2 different correctional institutions and working with the courts. And what I loved really about those was being able to do the research, do the data. In the DUI court, that was a large part of what I did, was collecting data to make sure that this program was sustainable and that it was cost effective. I like the idea of innovation, and I've had the chance in my current position and in previous positions to be able to look at the policies and procedures and see how we can expand them, how we can improve them, and then what new ones we can create that will best benefit the population that we're working with. I also, I've been pretty dedicated to the state of Nevada. I grew up here. I'm from here. I'm from Carson. I went to UNR. And though I've lived literally coast to coast, I lived in New York and I lived in San Diego. But Nevada's always been my home base. I care about this community. I care about this state. I've been a homeowner. I'm invested, and I've always came home. And this is where I feel like I have the best opportunity to utilize my skills and my education and be able to apply it here and to make the state even better and, make changes and improvements that's going to benefit all of us. So I think that's the most of my statement.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to members of the commission for questions.
John McCormick.
Franklin.
I'll defer.
Franklin Katchke. Ms. Eloyen, I was just going to ask, when you were the director of the Washoe County Felony DUI Court, can you give us an example of data that you collected and how you responded to that data and what you learned from whatever program you executed because of that data?
Yes, one of the most exciting things that I think, I started was looking at the sustainability and what cost effectiveness this program created. So because the program was designed to be 3 to 5 years for the participants that were in it, I started by looking at the previous 3 years before that person started the program. So looking at incarceration, looking at days spent in jail, looking at, you know, any intersection that they had with the criminal justice system that was a cost to the state or to the county. And then I looked at the 3 years while they were in, how many jail days if they had sanctions, how many hours they may have done for community service, and then being able to look at, and unfortunately by the time that I left, I only had about 1.5 years of exit data. But the idea was that we were going to look at the 3 years beforehand, the 3 years while they were in the program, and then 3 years after to compare and be able to justify the need for the program and funding for the program. One thing that I was able to piece out and to discern was even just looking at like the 3 years beforehand and 1 or 2 years in, and just in 1 year what that cost savings was and what that would have been compared to if they had been incarcerated. So being able to be out in the community, the amount of money that they were actually spending on interlock devices, house arrest, counseling, and what that would have looked like had that person have spent a year in prison, and how much money savings that was, and how much money was able to go back into the community.
Thank you, Joan McCormick. So in your current position, working with rural clinics, do you have any thoughts on the intersection there with the mental health system and the criminal justice system, and how those two systems could partner better, and if data could inform that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked in 2 institutions, both in California, and I worked at NCC before this. And I think, you know, it's common knowledge that jails and prisons really are the biggest housing of the mentally ill. We just don't have anything. Well, I shouldn't say we don't have anything, but we don't have the resources and the structure to be able to provide the care. So being able to work in rural clinics and to help facilitate, hopefully being able to provide some kind of preventative programming and resources and, ability to receive mental health care, to receive psychiatric medications, and receive those like case management services to hopefully keep people out of the criminal justice system. And what I think is also nice is that if somebody has been in the criminal justice system, jail or prison, coming back out doesn't disqualify them from seeking services again. So even if they are out or they are released and maybe they have received some kind of treatment or they are on medications and they want to keep that going, we can bridge that gap, and hopefully, you know, between Nevada Mental Health and Southern Nevada Mental Health, and then the rural clinics across the state, you know, depending on what community somebody re-enters into, being able to partner with that. And again, being able to look at the percentage of people that we treat and the you know, diagnoses, the medications, and looking at those compared to what the incarcerated population is, and seeing how we can better bridge that gap to hopefully, again, like I said, avoid incarceration.
Christine Jones-Brady for the record. Good morning.
Good morning.
With the various challenges that we have in our criminal justice system, from detainment to sentencing to incarceration, how do you see the role of the ED how do you see this position being able to offer some solutions, if any?
I think there's several different ways. Obviously, I mean, one thing that I really liked about looking at what this program does, and looking at some of the presentations and looking at the data, I think that there's some exciting opportunities to do a lot more research and to have, you know, I'm kind of that school nerd that starts a sentence with like the research shows, or you know, or like I was reading an article the other day, because I am interested in that and I want to know what the current research is and what we can do, and looking at, you know, other states or other areas and seeing how maybe there's something that we compare from them or we can learn from theirs and expand that. So I think, you know, being able to foster those new ideas and to collaborate and to come up with, you know, what is it that's working, what is it that's not, and what is our role and responsibility in trying to improve that. Like I was looking at a presentation that was in February, excuse me, and, you know, one of the areas that they were looking at, or that was stated in there, was the effectiveness of the like quick, we call them, you know, they do like a flash if they're on parole or probation, and then they have a violation, and then they come in and they do 30 or 60 days. And when I was working in the prison, that was one thing that always, you know, I questioned was, is this effective, and what are the resources that goes into making this happen for somebody just to be here 15, 25 days? And what else could be done in order to meet that need of the revocation, but also not use a large number of services and resources that could be put better somewhere else. So, yeah, like I said, looking at things like that, and looking at how other states are doing things, and then being able to make it fit for our community and improve it, and fostering the relationship with the people that are part of that team and the stakeholders, and making sure we're meeting everybody's needs or requests.
This is Jennifer Lanchman for the record. I was wondering if you can share with us your experience managing people and programs.
Yes, so I've had a fair amount of experience as a supervisor. At NCC, I was a supervisor and supervised 3 of the clinicians, and then I was also responsible for the inpatient unit, so like the mental health unit and the administrative segregation unit. So that was, having to partner with not just the mental health staff, but you also have to have custody, nursing, psychiatry, and foster those relationships, and to be able to build that kind of rapport to make the right things happen, and to be able to gain information and to share information effectively, so we're best meeting the need of whatever the inmate may need. In California, at the prison in San Diego I worked at, I was the program lead, so each yard had its own mental health program, and there was a program supervisor, and then there was a program lead, so it was kind of like, I was the second to the person in charge, and so there was, at least 14 to 16 clinicians that were part of that team. And so that involved doing schedules, assigning caseloads, doing, program improvements, meeting with custody on a regular basis, looking at different program developments, making sure that what we were doing was actually, again, within the rules and regulations and the statutes that were required to manage those, and then placing people in the right positions to do that. So there was a lot of moving parts, and, crises come up quite frequently. And so sometimes I had to be the bearer of bad news, but, one of the things that I did, I called it the wheel of misfortune. So everybody's name was on a list, and if there was something that came up that needed to be covered, I would send it to everybody first and say, hey, I need a volunteer. And if somebody volunteered, then they would be moved down to the bottom of the list. And then, so that way the next time something came up, they were not, getting hit multiple times. So that seemed to work pretty good, and it kind of added a little bit of humor that took the sting off, I think, sometimes.
Aaron Evans, for the record. Going back to your time in the DUI court and all that data collection you did, I see in your CV that you did a presentation on that data. Can you tell me who you presented it to, and how you presented it, and what you think the feedback was from that?
Yeah, so we were on a grant from NHTSA, from the National Highway. I'm going to totally mess up the acronym because I'm nervous, excuse me. But that was who presented. We did it to, but they had facilitated a panel, and this panel was from people across the U.S. that were involved in any type of DUI programming, any type of national highway traffic safety. So there's about 5 or 6 people that were on the panel, and they were looking at things that we had in this community, in this area, that dealt with DUIs. So they were looking at law enforcement, and then they were looking at our program. So I compiled that data, gave an overview of what the program was and what the goal was, and what, the expected outcomes were, and then what the components of it were, and what those costs look like, and then what money we were collecting in order to be sustainable after the grant had ran out. And again, presenting the data of what we had, uncovered as far as jail days or community service days prior to starting the program, and then what we had seen at that time as far as cost savings.
Chris DeRico, for the record. Hi. After reviewing and analyzing the Department of Sentencing Policy's website and their function and their role, what types of data are this state, or are we missing potentially, that you may see that might be an area to move forward with collection, if any, is my question.
One thing that comes to mind, and that I was looking at, and this comes back from doing treatment, is one thing that I've been curious about, I mean, we all know that staffing and funding and positions, there's a lot of positions that are open across the state of Nevada, and we see that quite a bit in corrections across departments. We see that with counselors, we see that with mental health, we see that with custody. And one thing that I ran into time and again, especially after COVID and groups and those sorts of things shut down, they haven't really got started back up yet. So we're not providing the services that these inmates need or that are required to either by sentencing or by recommendation of the parole board in order to be released. I think of, most commonly some of the sex offender programming that is required by their sentence or by the parole board that they have to have in order to be released or to be considered for release, and then we're not offering it, and we don't have the ability to offer that. So then that person winds up staying more days in prison. So then that's eating up more services, and that's utilizing, higher funding of which we could have put towards something else. So that would be data that I would be interested in looking at is that, what programming needs aren't meeting, and what is that costing the state in the meantime? So is that a function of needing to hire more staff, or is that a function of needing to provide more training for the staff that we do have in order to provide these services? But being able to look at what that dollar amount is in order to be able to hopefully justify, again, spending funding on training or spending funding on additional staff. And then what that would look like as far as like even parole and probation, having some sort of access to the programming that they're requiring the inmates to have, or the access to being able to get the assessments that they need. If they need a drug and alcohol screening and they're not able to do those within a certain amount of days, then they go back in for a revocation. So that's what I would be interested, just off the top, looking at.
Any members have any other questions for the candidate? Is there anything else you want to add?
No, thank you guys so much. I'm really excited about this, so thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your interview. Ms. Joseph? Yeah, if you can just, hi, good morning. Come up and sit in the middle seat right there. You all settled in?
I am.
All right, welcome. Thank you for applying and showing interest in the position and coming here to speak with us today. I'm going to turn this matter over, oh, strike that. Each candidate gets about 20 minutes.
Okay.
You have 3 to 5 minutes to give us kind of an opening statement, and then I'm going to turn it over to the commission members for questions.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Delana Joseph. Currently, I am a United States probation officer for the District of Nevada. I'm located out of Las Vegas. My background professionally is probation. Prior to that, I was a criminal defense investigator in Oregon. I'd moved there for about 3 years, decided I don't like snow and all the weathers. Oregon snow is different than Northern Nevada snow. It's definitely different. We moved back here. Prior to that, I worked as a correctional officer, and prior to that, I was a paramedic in Las Vegas. My education is, I am currently a doctoral candidate. I am working on my dissertation, which is in the field of criminal justice and public policy administration through Walden University. My dissertation is on police legitimacy and procedural justice and the disconnect between the police and the public. I have a master's in philosophy in criminal justice. I have a master's of science in forensic psychology, and I have a bachelor's of science in criminology. I love research. I feel like that's more my forte, and I really love corrections and prison. And now that I say that out loud, it sounds weird saying I love prisons. So So that is my background. I really focus a lot on a lot of my research on recidivism rates and the things that make successful candidates for supervision, and especially when it comes to those who have been justice involved since young age, specifically juvenile justice and delinquency, and how that correlates into adult offenders. Let's see, what else? I am more of a qualitative researcher, and I know that's kind of not a huge part for a lot of places that do conduct research, and I have found that that's been a lacking part in some research just because everyone focuses on quantitative. But my forte is more qualitative. I like knowing why people do the things that they do and what factors lead them there. And I think it gives a unique perspective and a different outlook on how we define statistics, especially when it comes to criminal justice. That's what I have.
All right, thank you. I'll turn it over now to the members for any questions you may have.
Evelyn Grosnick, good morning. Thank you for being here. What do you love about corrections and prison?
I find it's a weird environment. It's totally a different culture that I feel that you don't necessarily get to experience as a large whole, like out in the public. I mean, you have people that, you know, are felons or they're on supervision, but they're still in the public, which is a different environment than it is in prison. They've got weird rules. It's a weird hierarchy. It's kind of this awkward tinderbox almost at all times that one thing can set it off. And really getting to know your unit and how that works is kind of how you can diffuse those problems. And it's interesting to see how when people are in prison for long periods of times, how their mannerisms change and what can potentially cause that, and looking at the programs and stuff that we either have or do not have in prison, I think drastically dictate the outcomes of how well someone will do once released.
John McCormick, for the record. So, looking at your CV, it does not particularly look like you have a ton of supervisory experience. So, could you tell me just sort of about if you have that experience, and then your philosophy on supervision and how you plan to grow in that area?
So when I was a criminal defense investigator, I was the senior criminal defense investigator. I had anywhere between 5 to 10 investigators under me. We were a fairly small company when I started. I think we had maybe 50 cases total. When I left, we had a little over 350. So that was on average about 33 different attorneys, with each of us carrying our own caseload at about 80. So aside from my caseload, I supervised about 5 to 10 other investigators. We developed policies to kind of dictate a growing company. At the time, we didn't really have many because there was a total of 4 of us, and we did grow. So when it comes to supervisory, I mean, that's where my background was starting, being in a company from the very beginning to growing as much as we did in a short period of time.
Jim Hoffman, tell us more about your dissertation. What kind of research are you doing there?
So right now, the prongs of procedural justice, as researchers, we know what those prongs are and how we define them when it comes to voice, neutrality, transparency, and respect. The problem is right now that we don't know how the public defines those prongs. And what research has shown is that when procedural justice is applied effectively, that police legitimacy rates rise. And I think it's no shock to anyone here that police legitimacy rates are pretty low when it comes to the perception of the public, because that's what police legitimacy is dependent upon. It's the perception of the public. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter if we as researchers or we as professionals define those prongs a certain way if the public doesn't define them the same way. So as long as we're no longer speaking to each other and we don't know how the public defines those prongs, even if we as an agency are applying them effectively, it may not raise the legitimacy rates because it's not what the public wants, if that makes sense to you. So as we can define transparency, let's take Las Vegas Metro. Their big transparency thing is how they release their body cam footage. And I would like to say that they have a pretty good release rate on when they release their body cam footage. That is their definition of transparency. We don't know if that's what the public defines transparency is. We don't know if the public is wanting more than that, if they don't see body cam footage as being a thing of transparency, if they want to know more of how policies are developed. So that's the big unknown right now. And as long as, like I said, we're not addressing what the public wants or what the public feels is the definition of those prongs, it doesn't matter how we as an agency apply that, because legitimacy rates aren't going to change.
This is Jennifer Lanchman for the record. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Hoffman's question. So in your dissertation, are you actually exploring public perceptions of procedural justice? Or is this simply like an exposition of the fact that we don't know how the public defines procedural justice?
So right now I'm still in my proposal stage, which I hope to be done very soon. I will be conducting my own study. Right now I am using the North Las Vegas Police Department and their people under their jurisdiction, to where I will actually be physically going out there and interviewing people of the public and defining how they define those prongs, and then doing thematic analysis after that to define what we're kind of looking at as far as the findings are.
Christine Jones-Brady for the record. I'd like to follow up on Mr. McCormick's question. How would you describe your leadership style or management style?
I think I'm pretty open to recognizing that everyone works differently. One thing that I've noticed with offenders especially is that you can't use the same tactics for every offender, and that same goes for the same for people. Everyone has a different background and a different philosophy and outlook on life and how they react to things. So I like to think that I'm pretty open in discussing on how each person learns and what's effective for them. I know personally I am a hands-on person. Like, I have to physically do it or I'm not going to get it. You can tell me something a million times, and until I do it, I'm not going to be able, I don't get it as quickly. But I know other people can read something and be like, yeah, I get it. And I think recognizing that everyone learns differently and applies their job differently, I think is beneficial to leadership.
Michelle Bays for the record. Regarding the Sentencing Commission specifically, what do you see as its primary mission, biggest challenge, and then how you see your experience and education fitting into that?
So typically, sentencing commissions are designed so we get rid of disparate sentencing. As far as how my research goes, can you repeat the rest of the question?
Sure. Regarding your background, your experience, your education, how you see that fitting into and advancing the goals and the mission of the Sentencing Commission.
I mean, my background, I think, gives me a unique experience of looking at both how the defense works and how corrections works, and then how the corrections process goes to when offenders are released. I think understanding statistics and how we can apply those can better to develop policy and how we identify or address our stakeholders when it comes to that, because you're able to understand both sides and develop that into furthering the mission when you understand the statistics and you can develop policies that are evidence-based.
Franklin Katchke, I just want to follow up on that. You mentioned that you think that part of the role is to get rid of disparate sentencing. Do you have any examples of disparate sentencing in the state of Nevada?
I mean, I think we've gotten away from that because it's been a thing in the past. I wouldn't say specifically in Nevada, but it's nationwide. I mean, that's federally why we have the Sentencing Commission there, is because it gives guideline ranges so that you're not taking one person who's convicted of one crime and giving them, 20, 30 years, and having the same person or a different person, similar crime, and giving them 2 months. It's trying to make guidelines and make fairness so you're not having wide ranges of spectrums.
Lydia Stiglich. Ms. Joseph, I look at your resume, it's very impressive. I see currently you're in Las Vegas.
Correct.
You understand this position is in Carson City?
I do.
Okay, and that's not a problem?
No, my husband's actually from Fallon.
There you
So,
go. Especially in the middle of this summer, right?
yeah.
All right,
Carson
thank
sounds
you.
Great.
That's it. Thank you. Any other members have any questions for the candidate? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Ms. Joseph, thank you for your participation here today. Is there anything you want to add at the end? I'll give you another swing.
No, I think I'm good.
All right, thank you,
All right,
ma'am.
thank you.
Have a good day. Good morning, Ms. McCoy.
Good morning.
All right, y'all settled in?
Yes.
All right. So, Ms. McCoy, welcome, and thank you for your interest in the position and in coming in to answer questions from the commission. Give you, each candidate gets about 20 minutes. You have an opportunity to make a 3 to 5 minute opening statement. Then I'm going to open up to the floor to the members. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, I am. Thank
All
you,
right.
Chair. So, hello to the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate it. My name's Megan McCoy. I'm a native Nevadan. I grew up in Dayton, which is about 20 or so minutes away from here. And I grew up with horses, so a very different upbringing than most people experience. A lot of early mornings and hard work. And that actually led me to my interest in criminal justice and criminal justice reform. I am part of a nonprofit called Least Resistance Training Concepts, and through that we gentle previously wild horses. And when the prison, NDOC's Northern Nevada Correctional Center, they have a prison horse training program. So through meeting the inmates currently in that program, the lens was opened up to the issues within the system. Prior to that understanding coming to light, I was actually aiming toward the medical field. I received my associate in science from Western Nevada College, and I went to UNR starting with community health sciences. And the more I spoke with the inmates, the more the disparities and issues started coming to light. And I knew it would delay my graduation, but I went ahead and switched my major and switched to criminal justice. And I was lucky at UNR to find some really good professors who had done a lot of research on reform and reduction of recidivism. And that really pushed me toward really advocating for doing things differently. I am currently about halfway through a master's in criminal justice with an emphasis on legal studies. I did have to take a break from that. I will be starting up again this fall. I unfortunately got very sick and I was in the hospital and unable to continue. So I have to wait until the next cohort starts since I lost mine. But my hope is to somehow make a difference. And I know that this commission and the department also have that as a goal. So that's why this position is exciting. No matter who is appointed, something good is happening, and that's a major step forward for the state.
All right, thank you, Ms. McCoy. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleagues. Are there any questions for Ms. McCoy?
Excuse me, John McCormick for the record. Could you expand a little bit on any experience you have in supervising staff? Looking at your CV, it appears you did that a little bit with the City of Carson Recreation Department, but could you give me a little more information on that?
Absolutely. So with the City of Carson, I was a lead staff in their childcare program. So I supervised large groups of children. During the school year, I had the largest school in the city with over 60 children and 3 staff members under my supervision. And during the summer, I supervised, at least 150 children minimum and at least 15 staff minimum, not including the volunteers that are also there that were also under my supervision. More recently, it would be with the Technical Large Animal Rescue team that I'm on. I'm part of the board of the nonprofit, but in addition to that, I participate in Technical Large Animal Rescue, so we are trained and certified through, initially through a National Guardsman, and now through an independent but certified company. And we arrive on various levels of emergencies, whether it's government requested or through the cooperative agreement that our lead group has with the Department of Ag. And there can be a wide variety of supervision or supervisory moments in there. The main one is as incident commander, so the person in charge of the entire rescue operation and all of the people and all of their jobs. So like, for example, I was the incident commander on a call where we had a horse stuck in a cattle guard. The local fire department was also there. We ended up needing the jaws of life to get this horse out. So I had to work in cooperation with the fire department, but also make sure that every aspect of every job was being done properly and safely. So I've been incident commander on at least 50 calls, and safety officer on at least 150. In looking back the other day, it's quite a few, and as safety officer, everyone's safety is my responsibility. So if I have to call and I'll stop, and no one or people aren't listening, I have to make sure that I use the authority and confidence to stop, to stop what's happening and reset or reevaluate, because everyone's safety is my job.
Aaron Evans, for the record, looking in your cover letter, you talk about lots of experience preparing presentations and demonstrations. Can you tell us about some presentations you've given, the size of the audience, what kind of topics they were, if it was any data-related topics, things like that?
Yes, so my presentation preparation is mostly from the nonprofit side. We do presentations for governmental entities as well as private individuals who want to train. So we go from every basic aspect of technical large animal rescue all the way through the complex rope rescue systems and Z-rigs. So tailoring those to whatever is appropriate for that project or that goal is my main concern with it. So we use data in our rescue numbers. We run an average of 500 calls a year. And so we aggregate that data between highway incidents where Nevada Highway Patrol called us in versus a citizen's request versus responding for one of the counties during an emergency like flood or fire.
Troy Jordan, for the record. I wanted to follow up on that question. In looking at your cover letter, it also said you had done some sentencing data and compiling reports for the district attorney while you worked there. Could you explain to us what types of data and what type of collection or reporting you did in that sense?
Yes, so most of our data collection for the DA's office was done for statutory requirements. So there are 2 statutes in NRS that require each district attorney's office to compile certain data on arrests and sentencing. And so we would utilize the program that the DA's office used, which was Justware, and we would record every step of each prosecution, from every single arrest, whether a criminal complaint was filed or not, all the way through the plea agreements, through sentencing, and it was for each year. So if an individual happened to have violated, if they were out on probation or anything, that was also included. But the main focus of it was the patterns within the arresting, charging, and plea agreements. And then we also aggregated based on whether the individual was being represented by the public defender's office or a conflict counsel or private counsel, just to make sure that there were no disparities in sentencing or plea options based on indigent defense or private defense.
Are there any other questions for Ms. McCoy? Or the way we're set up, it's hard for me to I'm looking at the other screen there. Any other questions for Ms. McCoy? All right, then, Ms. McCoy, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Everything that I have dreamed of since starting in the criminal justice system is what this position and this department does. So I'm very excited for the opportunity to be here and have a shot at this. But either way, just thank you guys for all that you do to make things better for the state in general, and also for the citizens and those who are in the custody of the department and definitely deserve change and improvement.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Good morning, Mr. Poole.
Good morning.
All right, are you all settled in?
I believe so.
All right. Welcome. My name's Lydia Stiglich. Welcome, and thank you for your application and your willingness to come answer, your interest in the position, your willingness to come here and speak with us today. Each candidate, sir, gets up to about 20 minutes, 3 to 5 minute opening statement, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions.
Okay.
All right.
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to appear. I've been kind of looking forward to it. I get nervous speaking in public like most people, but I watched a lot of meetings, so the faces look familiar somewhat. So that kind of helped out a little bit. A little bit about me. My name's Donald Raymond Poole. I use my middle name because my dad's junior and I'm the third. I was born in New Jersey, grew up in Maryland, south of Washington, D.C. I moved out here about 2005, settled in Gardnerville, and have been in the same neighborhood since then. I love the state. My kids love the state. Not going to go anywhere. I was a police officer for about 25 years, both on the East Coast and out here. So I really think that helps me have a different perspective on criminal justice, especially in this kind of line of work as well as this position, because I've actually seen the results of changes that the commission recommends to the legislature, and actually see on the street how they affect not only the public but the officers and people that have to implement and live by them. So I believe that helps me have a different perspective. I also been teaching criminal justice courses at Lake Tahoe Community College since 2011. It really affords me an opportunity to interact with different cultures, different students from all over the country, really. And that also gives me an opportunity to help see what criminal justice, how it affects younger people, and what they're looking at as they learn about the system as a whole. It also helps me, along with my current job working at the Lyon County Court Services, I'm in charge of the pretrial services division, and that has really helped me learn the other side of the system versus the law enforcement side. Now I get to see what happens after I bring people to jail. And it has opened my eyes greatly. And even people that knew me have asked me, are you the same person? When I recommend somebody shouldn't be in jail, I don't think their score, their criminal history, their job, the level of crime that they committed, they're better served being on some sort of supervision. And I'm learning that's working better than just straight incarceration. Another big aspect of that job that I think would bring, that would help me in this position, is getting the right information to the right people to make the right decisions. We interview people arrested. We try to verify their information about home, work information, phone numbers, email address, contact. We check their criminal history. We use our risk assessment. We score them. And we present that to the public defender, the district attorney, and the judges, and give them a recommendation, and they have to ultimately make the decision. So gathering information, making sure that right information is correct, and getting it to the people that make the decision on a county level. When I saw this position, I thought, wow, that'd be pretty cool to do it at a state level, and maybe help make some changes that need to be made. And this state seems to be taking the good way to do it. And having worked in California, I've seen the bad way to do it. So I really wanted to be a part of helping Nevada continue with a way to be a good leader in this area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Poole. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. And actually, I have a quick question. So Lydia Stiglich, sorry. So Mr. Poole, what do you think then, you use the California-Nevada example, what do you think California is doing wrong that Nevada is doing right?
For what I've seen about Nevada is they're taking more of a analytical approach. They seem to be more gathering more research. And like the commission, like I just recently learned, started looking at misdemeanor crimes instead of just straight felony crimes, adding homeless as a variable. And California seems to do everything in knee-jerk reaction. They have a giant population, they have a problem, and they immediately do a knee-jerk that affects everybody disproportionately. So I believe Nevada has done it better by slowing it down a little bit. I know our population is much smaller, but I believe the population is being served better by taking that little pause and getting, again, the right information to the right people.
All right, thank you, Mr. Poole. Members, questions for Mr. Poole?
For the record, John McCormick, can you tell me a little bit about your experience supervising staff and your sort of management philosophy?
Thank you. My current job, I'm a supervisor. We have 2 other officers that I supervise. I also have a caseload, so sometimes it gets kind of tight. As a law enforcement officer, I filled in for a sergeant on numerous occasions, allowed me to oversee a squad of anywhere from maybe 4 to 5 officers at a time. And my management is more of a collaborative approach. I like to understand and hear what everybody has to say, especially with law enforcement, especially with criminal justice, and I think in any aspect of it, it's teamwork. Everyone has a part to play, and I think everyone's position is important, and they all need to be heard.
Christine Jones-Brady for the record. I know that Lyon County over the last few years has made a lot of changes and in terms of how the social services works with the law enforcement, and they've applied for a few grants and so forth. Can you describe your role in making some of those changes and what they were and what you think is working?
That's a good question, because I believe that the mental health part of criminal justice has been overlooked greatly. And the ability of the FAST and most teams in Lyon County, the mobile outreach, and then the FAST is when they work within custodies. I reached out to the human services, and the judges helped direct me to the other people in charge, and then reaching out to the sheriff's office there in Lyon County, especially with the corrections. And we formed up weekly meetings where they ask about if I found anybody that would benefit from the services, because we interview them in the jail, and the FAST, most teams sometimes do not get to do that because they're just overwhelmed. So we direct them to their services, and they direct when we have them on supervision and we find out that there's some issue where they may need some services or some housing or some counseling or some additional counseling or anything along the lines that falls under the human services, their phone call, we have all their contact information. And like I said, we started up regular weekly meetings with them, which allows a really good collaboration between the courts and their human services for the county.
Evelyn Grosnick. As you know, the executive director leads the Department of Sentencing Policy in fulfilling statutory duties to facilitate the collection of criminal justice data, as well as identifying variables that may implicate that data in the future. Can you talk a little bit more about any training, experience, or education that you have in data research, management, or collection?
Thank you. With my current job, we do a lot of gathering data with all the inmates and all the people on our supervision. Our data points are not as in-depth as the commission does, but it has given me a little bit of baseline on how to collect that and how to analyze that and present a report to the judges. I also, when I got my master's degree in justice management through UNR, I took several classes on data collection and analytics and statistics. So that kind of gave me a little bit of the educational side of that as well.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Poole? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Mr. Poole, is there anything you'd like to add, sir?
I just, again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was a little shocked when I got the email that allowed me to show up, so I really appreciate the chance to at least get some of my thoughts out to everyone. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your service and your participation here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Morning, Ms. Powers. All right, are you all settled in? Yes, please. And so, Ms. Powers, each candidate gets up to 20 minutes. Give you an opportunity to make a 3 to 5 minute opening statement, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for any questions they may have. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I have prepared a statement. Good afternoon, Commission Chair. My name is Georgia Powers, and I seek appointment to the Executive Director position for the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy. I am currently the Deputy Director of NDSP. I was recruited to the department as the Policy Analysis Manager in November of 2021, bringing with me 14 years of experience with the Department of Corrections, most recently as the Administrator of the Offender Management Division. You have read my resume, but what you might not glean there is that my involvement with NDSP did not begin in November of 2021. Months earlier, through my role as the administrator of OMD, I had the pleasure to work with Executive Director Gonzalez and begin the relationship between DOC and NDSP. Legislation required NDSP to collect data from DOC. My role as OMD administrator included oversight of the DOC data and statistics section. So I collaborated with Director Gonzalez and led my team to find the best methods to collect and submit the statutorily required data to NDSP. This began a partnership that brought about the collaboration and data sharing that exists presently and which facilitated the amazing dashboards regarding DOC populations and trends. My position as the administrator of the Offender Management Division was also where I first became familiar with the legislative process. I answered questions from legislators regarding proposed legislation and the potential impact on DOC and the individuals housed there. After Assembly Bill 241 passed in 2021, I led the OMD Data and Statistics section, along with the IT team, to identify and build the best method to implement the credits that AB 241 awarded incarcerated individuals during the COVID pandemic. This experience cemented my appreciation of the importance of front-end collaboration with stakeholders and legislators in making informed, data-driven policy decisions. It is important to examine all aspects of the situation and actively listen to those with on-the-ground experience in the areas that will be affected. Listening, collaboration, and consideration of multiple viewpoints are skills I practice daily at DOC. First on the prison yard as a correctional casework specialist, and later in leadership as the OMD administrator. In prison, my job was to look at all aspects of individual situations and give them tools to help their rehabilitation and eventual return to society. This involved taking many factors into consideration and weighing the possible risks and benefits for not only the person on my caseload, but other incarcerated individuals, staff, victims, and the public. As the OMD administrator, I use these same ideas, but at a global view to determine how individual policy decisions would affect the department as a whole, each separate DOC facility, groups of incarcerated people, and Nevada citizens. This weighing of all sides is exactly what the executive director of NDSP must do. Gather information from stakeholders and criminal justice partners to understand all sides of issues and ensure that the data collected is analyzed and interpreted considering all entities. And collaborating to reach the most equitable and practical solution. Of course, the data gathered must be impartial and reliable. One of my first impressions of the Department of Sentencing Policy was that their goal was not to paint a picture, but to actually uncover the truth that Nevada's data tells. I told everyone about this new department and their vision to use actual Nevada mind and analyze data to create Nevada policy. When the opportunity arose, I joined the NDSP team in a lateral move because that is how much I believe in this vision of Nevada data leading Nevada decision-making. Being a part of this process has been exciting and fulfilling, and I am ready to lead this effort into the future. NDSP worked very hard this last legislative session, gathering information and data and presenting it in a transparent and nonpartisan way. Our team was able to collaborate with many different Nevada entities who were often presumed to be at odds, and we facilitated a move toward the middle by presenting Nevada-focused factual data. This helped important legislation pass during session. The passage of these bills led to requirements for the department to track data points and provide reports regarding the outcomes of the new statutes. Fulfilling these mandates is the next focus. This ushers in a new era for NDSP, an era of implementation. An acute understanding of the bills that passed and the collaboration that went into the final products will be very important moving forward. This is why I'm the correct person for this position. I provide continuity in our vision and goals. I can maintain and strengthen the relationships built with the stakeholders to move forward with the collection, analysis, and reporting of data regarding fentanyl in Nevada, temporary parole revocations, murder data, the study of Nevada misdemeanors, DOC sentence credits, population projections, and any new projects requested of us. Under my leadership, NDSP's vision will continue to expand, and our mission to provide reliable criminal data justice data, practical fiscal analysis, and comprehensive policy resources to lawmakers, stakeholders, and the public will flourish. Do we all wish there was no reason for this particular agenda item? Of course we do. Director Gonzalez has been an incredible leader, and working alongside her has prepared me for this. I am the choice for NDSP Executive Director. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Powers. I'll turn it over now to my colleagues. Any questions for Ms. Powers?
Franklin Katchke for the record. Ms. Powers, can you just, when you were with the Nevada Department of Corrections, you have on your resume here about the application of COVID sentence credits. Could you just describe to us how that came along and how that was data-driven, please?
Yes, I apologize. I couldn't understand your question. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. So under your resume, it stated that you spearheaded a project to apply COVID sentence credits. Could you describe to us how that came along and what your function, I guess, was in that in applying those COVID credits?
Yes. So AB 241. The idea of it came about, and the assemblywoman who spearheaded it called DOC, and I was the person who received that call, to understand how sentence credits worked. And in general, sentence credits for DOC are very convoluted and not transparent. That became apparent during this last session when we talked about that a lot. So once the bill passed, we had to figure out a way to make DOC's computer system allow us to apply these credits monthly. We had to go into the past when the pandemic started, and then keep applying them until the governor said that the pandemic had ended. So the administrative OMD is above the data and statistics section, and so we started there. I pulled my team together, asked them to look at how many people this would affect. How many credits are we talking about? And what is the best way to move forward to give these credits? In lump sums? Do we do it monthly? How will this work? How will it affect the actual sentence of the offender? We had to think about their parole, so we talked to parole and probation and to the parole board to find out what this would do to their caseloads and how to do it incrementally so there was not this large surge. Then we brought in the IT department to actually make it work in the system. So basically I spearheaded the project, pulled my team together, and made sure that they were implemented as it was written in the law.
Julia Murray, for the record. You acknowledged, I think rightfully, that there has been a lot of activity with the commission through this last 2-year session, and much of it has been at work that was being built upon in the prior 2 years. You are in a unique position to have been privy to that. Can you identify an area where you find the department still to be lacking, either in an item that we should be working towards, or where we could improve an area that we are working towards, and what you would do to do that?
Yes. As I mentioned, we, in the last session, passed all of these laws, and it requires data. We all know that we do not have a uniform system. There are discrete systems throughout the state for law enforcement, for courts, for everything. And so our gaps have been and remain getting that data and being able to use it, being able to mine that data, decide how to store it. We, right now at NDSP, are working on databases, and so that we can decide which data points will fit together? And do we need another database for the courts, or can they talk to each other? So the answer to your question is gaps in data and ways to have them submitted. Yeah, we've talked about pulling legislature in maybe next year to having mandates of the way data is given to us, and that would help tremendously.
Thank you.
Michelle Bays for the record. Just to follow up on that, what would you say the role of confidence in the analysis of data by the Sentencing Commission plays in the collection of it and presentation to the public, to stakeholders, those submitting it, the agencies involved?
I think for any situation, the confidence is going to be number one. I believe that the team and department that Director Gonzalez built is a great foundation because, as I said, we have been able to bring together people from different areas of criminal justice who will agree that this is the data. Prior to this, everyone had their own data, and so nobody believed it. The invent of NDSP has allowed Nevada to trust the data, and therefore that gives us a better foundation to present different types of analysis that will be used and, again, trusted. And the presentations. Being able to present the results of our analysis and the data that we have in a way that is transparent, that someone can go back and look at the root. Where did we get this data? Yes, I get the same answer. NDSP, will you tell me how you did this? Yes, we can. We can absolutely give you a step-by-step guide to how we got to the answers we did. Please recreate them yourselves so that you do trust us. So the presentations and the transparency, I think, is the biggest thing.
Aaron Evans for the record. Good morning, Ms. Powers. In your cover letter and in your statement, you talked about a period of implementation or an era of implementation. Can you expand on that and what that means to you and what your role as the executive director would be to help these implementation ideas?
Yes. So all of the data that has been collected, we have presented, we have given to people when they have asked. It is on our dashboards. However, the new laws that have passed require many more data points, many more reports. And so the implementation process I'm talking about is fulfilling those duties, fulfilling these reports, fulfilling getting the data that the laws have asked us to. We are a small agency, so that executive directors is knee-deep, pull your boots up, doing the work also. So as an executive director, it would be to build a team, keep a team that has the, that fills the needs of the department so that the analysis can continue so that we can implement these laws. The team that we have is very good at what they do, and we have gotten another position. And so choosing the right people is part of the implementation process, people that can fill the needs of our department.
Michelle Bays for the record. Just another question. I echo what you had said earlier about the leadership that has existed so far with the department. So I wanted to hear from you what you felt would distinguish you as a leader, executive director, and maybe some of the goals that you would focus on.
So, my skill set is with relationships. Through DOC, I worked with the parole board, parole and probation, the AG's office, courts, the legislators, victims, inmates, families. And so what I bring to leadership is that skill in relationship building, and understanding how a person moves through the criminal justice realm. I believe that that will make me a strong executive director for NDSP. I believe my goals are to continue that vision, to be a support to the commission, to be a support to Nevada, to fill those gaps in data that are missing so that we can provide even more information for data-driven policy recommendations.
All right, do any members have any other questions for Ms. Powers? All right, hearing none, seeing none. Ms. Powers, thank you for your service so far, and thank you for your interview here today.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. White. Are you settled in? I'm good. All right, good morning. I'm Lydia Stiglich. Sir, welcome. Thank you for your interest in the position and your willingness to come speak to us here today. Each candidate gets up to about 20 minutes. You have an opportunity to make a 3 to 5 minute opening statement, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for any questions they may have. Thank you.
You can hear me okay now. Obviously, my name's Todd White. I am a proud native Nevadan, born and raised. I have lived, worked, and gone to school in every corner of the state. I have a wonderful family, wife of over 30 years, 3 adult children, and I just think this is an amazing opportunity. Obviously, you've seen my resume. I spent over 25 years with the federal judiciary, U.S. Probation Office, 4.5 years before that with Nevada DPS, with 2 of the divisions. I think this is an amazing opportunity to be part of the sentencing recommendations and the correction programs moving forward for the state of Nevada, and being able to support this commission's work and put the money where the data says it should be put, whether it's repeat offenders, violent offenders that need more prison time, or obviously lower level, less serious crimes, money being put into programs that can save the taxpayer millions and millions of dollars. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, sir. I'll turn it over to my colleagues now for any questions they may have.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Lanterman.
Morning.
Can you share with us your experience either conducting or supervising personnel in the collection and analysis of data?
Yes. So obviously in my previous position as the division manager in Reno, we have incredible support out of Washington, D.C. So the data collection that I have experience with is once pre-sentence reports are produced, the sentencing occurs, a revocation occurs in federal court, then the data, the sentencing data, the revocation data, that must be all produced, must be sent to the administrative office and the U.S. Sentencing Commission in Washington, D.C., so that they can input the data there so that then it's available to be spit back out to what we call the field, or the 94 federal districts. So the data entry of sentencing, revocation hearings, the paperwork part of it occurs at the district level, but then it's sent to Washington for other people to input. And they created a system, we call it DSS, the digital system, to where at that point, at any time, and part of my job as a manager, for various reasons, I would have to access the DSS system to pull data, not only from the District of Nevada, but from other districts, depending on the projects I was involved in, national initiatives I was involved in. So that's, because that's where I worked, that's how things are handled.
Christine Jones-Brady for the record.
Good morning.
Good morning. What lessons could we as Nevada learn from the federal system and how they collect and analyze data?
Well, let's not kid ourselves. The federal government doesn't do everything right. But forgive me for a little family history. My dad was 32 years Nevada Highway Patrol back in his time. And after I graduated college, he gave me some real sound advice because of his experience working for the state and some of the issues that state employees had then and quite frankly still have now. He told me, get to the feds. You'll see the country. They're able to print money, so you have lots of opportunity to go to great leadership conferences, great conferences of obviously from A to Z within the criminal justice field. But I did love the professionalism of working in the federal court system and the U.S. Probation Office. Quite frankly, the equipment that is available is outstanding, generally cutting edge. The systems that are developed for record retention, I mentioned one a little bit ago, the DSS system. The opportunity to travel the country, to be involved in you could say task force work or different committee work. It was exceptional. I wouldn't trade the years I spent there for anything. The organization of the structure of the organization I worked for, the leadership that was available, and for younger staff to be mentored. It was, at least the judiciary, the probation office, it was top notch. When I was hired, the chief probation officer told me from a community correction standpoint that this was the tip of the spear. And I had worked 2 years at Highway Patrol and then 2 years at State Parole back in the 90s. And when he told me that, it was kind of overwhelming, quite frankly. Within 3 years, I knew what he meant.
Michelle Bays for the record. You referenced in your paperwork here that you submitted that some of your key strengths are policy research and formulation. So I thought if you could speak a little bit on that and maybe provide some examples and how you would see that fitting into this position.
Yes, as stated in my resume, I had an opportunity at the district level as well as nationally to be in policy formation for programs like what we called location monitoring, GPS or electronic monitoring, search and seizure, use of force. Primarily for me was ASPATON and how that would be properly used. One of the biggest projects I was ever involved in was a reentry program we ran out of the Reno Federal Courthouse for 7 years. And it was a very different model. It was for post-release, people that were on what we call term of supervised release after coming out of federal prison. And we, unlike most local and state courts that are, diversionary or pretrial type programs, it was post-conviction, and it was with multi-time felons, every type of offender other than sex offenders. And myself and another officer, primarily, were both senior officers at the time. We were tasked with help from other people, obviously, to go around the country and observe and look at local and state reentry programs and specialty courts. And we did that for about 3 years and got to see the country and meet a lot of awesome people. But then we had to come up with a policy. And so he and I primarily ended up putting together that policy. We ended up calling it CLEAR, for Court-Led Efforts at Recovery. And that ran from 2011 to 2018 in the Reno Federal Courthouse. So, and many other projects, I think I referenced many of them on my resume that I was involved in my career, of strategic planning, policy for the district. We're here now, we need to go there over the next 5 years. So hopefully those are some good examples for you.
Mr. White? Sorry. With Lydia Stiglich, for the record. With respect to the CLEAR program,
yes.
What did you, in developing that kind of reentry policy and program, what did you find that offenders were not getting in prison that made it more difficult for them to successfully reenter? And then once they were in the CLEAR program, what did they need to be successful upon release?
Okay, so the first part is what they weren't getting in prison. And to be honest, I want to be honest, I've never worked in a jail or a prison, and that is an unbelievably challenging job, and the dedication, that 24/7 nature. But when we would get them for supervision, whether just general supervision or those that agreed and volunteered for the CLEAR program, most of the time they would come out and they just felt like they weren't going to have a good opportunity for a good job. That was usually the biggest complaint. Luckily, most of the federal offenders that came out did have a place to live. Most of them, if not, the federal system has a great halfway house system throughout the country, and the partners that are involved. But it was always the employment issue, and even if they got a job right away, it was low wages typically. And so it was about workforce development. It was about partnering with state agencies like DETR with Nevada and many local agencies to help them do simple things like build a resume. And even if you've been in prison for 7 years, there's a way to build a resume that you can give to a potential employer, and a way to explain why you were in prison, what you learned from being in prison, how you've changed, so you can kind of turn it into a positive during the interview experience. But that was the biggest complaint about coming out of prison, was just the lack of good jobs was the number one. And the second part, I'm sorry, Justice.
Sorry, Lydia Stiglich, for the record. So the second part is, what did you think was most important that you could provide in the reentry process to help them succeed on the outside?
Yeah, it's really called, you call it different things, but wraparound services. So what I loved, and going back even to, I think, a previous question, was in the federal system, when we would get a pre-release packet of somebody that was pending release from the Bureau of Prisons, we would get that typically no less than 6 months out, and sometimes up to 2 years, depending on the type of crime that had committed and what that particular offender, the issues they had in their life. Could be lack of family support, lack of housing. So that system is excellent, the way it's set up. Sex offenders, we would typically get 18 to 24 months out because of the nature of supervising them, and in the federal system, most of the time, those are lifetime supervisees now. And the issues involved. Some places they won't take them for housing because of insurance issues. Their insurance companies, they won't take sex offenders. So lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Would you please repeat the second part? I'm so sorry.
Really just the components of your program.
Oh, yeah, the
reentry program.
wraparound, excuse me, the wraparound services. So we would have, before they came out, we would know, last minute things do happen, but we would always have housing set up, either with an approved family member, a spouse, obviously. If we had to get a modification, put them in halfway houses, we would have the treatment already scheduled before they ever hit our office for the first time. If there was community service work, that was set up through different organizations. So it's wraparound services. If they mental health, obviously substance abuse treatment for many of them, sex offender treatment, all of those things are scheduled during that 6 to 18-month period while the officer is investigating and doing what we call the pre-release investigation. So those are the challenges, but I think as an office, because of the policies that are in place with the federal court system, that it works pretty well, and getting those services set up beforehand, not waiting until you have the body, is really important.
Thank you. Colleagues, does anyone have any other questions for Mr. White? All right, hearing none, seeing none. Mr. White, anything you want to add?
I would just reiterate, thank you for your time. What a wonderful opportunity, I think, whoever gets this position. And quite frankly, even if I don't, I think the work that this commission is doing and what the department is doing is necessary for the state of Nevada, for its future, for sentencing properly, giving proper information to judges, to parole boards, or the parole board, and spending those limited taxpayer resources in the right way and not wasting them. With that, thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, thank you for your interview. All right. Colleagues, that concludes our interviews today. I'm going to close this agenda item, and we're going to break until 11:10, so everybody can get organized, and then we'll pick up with item 6 and discuss these fine candidates. Thank you. All right, can't see in Las Vegas. Are we ready to get started back up? Down there, anyone?
Yes, we're ready.
All right, excellent, thank you. Then we'll open agenda item number 6. Discussion concerning recommendations to the governor for appointment of Executive Director of Department of Sentencing Policy. So now that we've completed the interviews, is there anything the commission would like to review or discuss before I entertain motions on who to recommend to the governor to appoint as our next executive director? I will open the floor.
This is Chris Tirico for the record. So I know I brought this up at the last meeting. I just want to make sure that we are doing this properly, that we don't have any problem, have to come back and do this again. Yeah, and statutorily says must be appointed by the governor from a list of 3 persons and statutorily. So I just want to make sure we get at least 3 people's names out of here.
All right, thank you for that comment. And I think in terms of the numbers, it was a different situation last time around. This time around, I think the difficulty is going to be narrowing down to 3 names to submit to the governor. So it's my intention to at least seek a motion for 3 names to go forward today.
Michelle Bays for the record. Oop, that did work. Which were the candidates that withdrew, and then the one that was wanted
All
to
right.
continue to be considered was the Coughlin?
So the candidates that withdrew were Ms. Bass, Mr. Burkholder, and then those are the 2 that withdrew. Mr. Coughlin submitted an application. His application was not complete. It did not have references, and that wasn't like I asked references and they didn't send them in. He said, I don't need to provide them. And then he opted not to interview today. So anyone on this commission is welcome to give that application due consideration and put it in any motion or discussion that they wish. So we have 7 people who appeared in front of us today.
Interesting question.
And Siri agrees that. Thank you. All right. So does anyone have any, yeah, that was an interesting question. Anyone would like to open the floor? Happy to. I can break the ice. I'll share some of my thoughts. I think we've been very privileged to have Director Gonzalez and the incredible team that she's put together. And there's so many different pieces and components. And this is kind of, in my view, a unique commission in the sense that it really it's an implementer for this commission, but it's also a generator, and it's a generator of ideas and thought and projects for this commission to consider, and certainly for them to make work. So I feel like there's a huge benefit to the kind of policy thinking component of this. And then there's an experiential component, so people who have actually familiarity with corrections, with Nevada, with all those other pieces. And I think today, for me, I've narrowed it down to 4 candidates some for the same reasons, some for different reasons that I think could potentially lead this group. And that was Trish Eloy, I'll say her name wrong again, Elwin, I believe, Delenya Joseph, Georgia Powers, and Todd White. So those were 4 people that were on my list of consideration, and I look forward to hearing from each of you.
Down in South, this is James Aranda. Those were actually, I was going to say the same thing that you just said and select down to 4 that I thought of, and those were the exact same 4 that I thought of as well. I thought they all had little differences in each that are distinctive that would be a benefit to the commission. They all had some strengths. I see some weaknesses in all of them that I thought would have, that may be something that is learned upon as you get in the position. But I do see the strengths in each one of those 4 that I think are a benefit to all of us, that would, either one of them would be a great candidate.
So, Assemblyman? or Senator, I'm sorry,
Thanks.
Senator, I can't see.
I
Guy-
also.
Okay.
Okay now?
It's, no, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I also felt Deloyan, Joseph, Powers, and White were my top four. And I would put Deloyan and Joseph as my top two. So if we're only doing three, either Powers or White is the third. And I would say, just back to the criteria you talked about, Justice, in terms of sort of generating policy ideas, that's probably what led me to think about Aloyan and Joseph as the top two.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Brady?
Thank you, Chair Stiglich. The top four that I had were Eloyan, Poole, Powers, and White. And I had White and Caffaretta pretty close together.
Michelle Bays for the record. I think a pretty uniform with Powers and White being up at the top two. I do think that possibly Joseph's, while she was up there with Elwin, maybe her experience is a little overstated. And then I do have to just mention too, Ms. Caffaretta has such an incredible background and history with the state. She certainly is up there as well, but I think Powers and White for me are at the top.
This is Chris Tirico for the record. I was kind of in the same dilemma as you were, Justice Stiglitz, where I had four that I thought really rose to the top, and it were those same four that you mentioned, alphabetically, Aloyan, Joseph, Powers, and White. And so that's kind of where I am right now as well.
This is Jennifer Lanchman for the record. I have some similar views about strengths and drawbacks to each candidate, but some slightly different picks. I think Ms. Powers, Dr. Elwin, and Ms. Caffaretta would be my top three. I do have some concerns about Mr. White, specifically with respect to his really limited understanding of research design, data collection, analysis, and how those data would be used to develop policy. So he might develop very limited policy, but that's different than statewide policy the Department of Sentencing Policy and Sentencing Commission would be responsible for generating.
Evie Grosnick. I would like to echo Dr. Lanterman's concerns with Mr. White. He does have a lot of experience in corrections, but it did seem somewhat limited in that way, and especially the data collection. Given the role of the executive director in leading the department in facilitating the collection of criminal justice data and identifying variables or sets of data that are not collected or shared, I think it does require a heavy background in data and analysis, data collection, understanding how to keep the integrity of data, like Michelle Bays brought out, as well as understanding the system as a whole. And so my top two were Ms. Elwin and Ms. Powers, and then I thought Ms. Joseph was sort of a third choice of mine.
Aaron Evans, for the record, I agree on Ms. Aloyan and Ms. Powers being kind of 1A, 1B. The third choice gets a little more difficult. I do agree with Chief Bays on Ms. Joseph's experience. I like the experience of Ms. McCoy. I know she's not been discussed, but her years at LCB and seeing all the legislation that goes through and making the changes or updates and all that stuff, I thought that experience would be valuable as well. So unfortunately, I've got a really strong top two, and then we'll see how the third one goes, I guess.
Julia Murray for the record. Chair, am I permitted to ask a question of the other commission members? Okay. Could one of you that highlighted your concerns regarding Ms. Joseph's experience level explain that just a little bit without getting into much? I want to know what that's about before I say my own thoughts.
Aaron Evans for the record. She spent a couple of years with parole and probation and a couple of years with corrections, and then it's spent a lot of work in like the research schooling field. So I just don't know that there's been as much like implementation of all that knowledge that she's been working on. Whereas like specifically comparing her to Ms. Aloyan in her work at the DUI court and her presentations to NHTSA and collecting and gathering that data, like I just felt like there's a big gap of still in the learning process to actually putting it into work.
Okay, thank you, Julia Marie again. And then did that cover your concerns as well, or was there something additional?
Yeah, no, nothing other additional, well, a little bit. In the position where she, and I don't know Oregon structure, but it sounded, she actually presented it was like a contract company with a very small number of people. So I really just echo what was just already said and just added that.
Sorry, Julia Murray again. Thank you both. Sometimes it's hard to glean what someone else is thinking about when we kind of talk in such generalities when we're having these conversations. My 1 and 2, for the same reasons that have been stated quite succinctly and eloquently by Ms. Lanterman, would be the Ms. Aloyan as well as Ms. Powers. I think they have demonstrated the most significant ability to actually do the data aspect of this job, which I think is sort of the starting point for everything this commission's responsible for. I don't think we can even get to the question of legislation and policy making and corrective change and looking at what works and doesn't work if we're not working with numbers that cause us all to not fight. And having sat through many meetings at this stage with everyone, we are all inclined to fight about the nature of the numbers. So I think we, at a minimum, need to be in support of where the numbers are coming from and what the numbers look like and what the numbers mean in order to do anything as a commission. So my one, I think someone referred to him as a 1A, 1B, and I support that, would be those two candidates. I hear and I understand the concerns regarding Ms. Joseph. I do believe she is also a strong candidate that if we're adding 3, we should be considering and maybe discussing further. I think she brings to the table an interesting balance of working on both sides of kind of each aspect of what this commission touches. She has worked on the investigation side in the defense aspect, which is very close to the police investigative arm in dealing with people on the street level. She has worked in the carceral system. She has worked in the research facility aspect of education. So she at least has a lot of perspectives that, if nothing else, generate good questions and would push forward conversations related to policy writing and development. I also have some concerns regarding candidate White. I think while certainly impressive in his federal career, I am concerned on 2 fronts. One, whether that experience truly affords an understanding of the nuances and the difficulties that face the state of Nevada in an informed way that would be able to quickly translate into doing real work. And 2, I have some concerns regarding his lack of experience in the numbers aspect, which is where my first 2 candidates rose to the top. So that would be my thoughts.
This is Chris DeRico for the record. So in reviewing and looking through these candidates, I I chose to start with the Department of Sentencing Policy's core functions and priorities, which are listed on there. I know we've heard a lot. There is a lot about data and reports. Absolutely, this is a job that does. I guess in my mind, I was looking at those 5 functions and priorities as listed, which were administrative, budget, commission, outreach, and data and reports. So I tried not to focus my thoughts in just one area, try to look at it all. The one thing at least I do know is Ms. Gonzalez has a fantastic staff who has been able to assist and develop there. So I guess while the main purpose seems to be data, I guess there is so much more than just the data, and I tried to really look at well-rounded.
John McCormick for the record. Chair, I'm willing to make a motion to move this along if you are ready to entertain one.
Go forth.
All righty. I would move that the Sentencing Commission send the following 3 names to the governor for the selection of the executive director. Ms. Loyan, Ms. Powers, and Ms. Joseph.
Lydia Stiglich for the record. We have a motion. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you can say we have a motion for Mr. McCormick. Is there a second?
James Arenda for a second.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to forward those 3 names to the governor. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Michelle Bays for the record. I agree with 2 of those names, but how would we? I just propose, what about doing them one at a time, potentially?
Well, we have a motion and a second, so unless there's I'll turn to the director. Something to add?
Yeah, Victoria Gonzalez for the record, and the director. So I would say first, obviously the motion could be amended. So we have this motion on the table right now. We have the discussion. We could move forward with a roll call vote of this specific motion, and if it's a majority, we can leave it. We could also, if it fails, work towards a different motion.
May I ask sorry, Evie Grosnick, may I ask a question? Do we have to send 3 names?
As I read it, when we have more, I think yes, we do. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm right. That's just what that's what I, as I understand it, I think that, and it's the fairest to the governor. We have a number of qualified candidates, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Chief Bays?
John McCormick for the record. I was going to say that listening to the discussion, I will amend my motion that we send Powers and Aloyan up and then figure out the 3rd one separately.
Aaron Evans for the record. I second that motion.
All right.
I'm sorry, Jim Hoffman. I had a thought. What if we just vote separately on each candidate, and the ones that get a majority, then if there's 3 or less, those are the 3. If there's more than 3 that get a majority, then we decide who to cut. Maybe that's like the cleanest way of getting who we all want.
Well, I think we have that's certainly one method. We have a motion and a second, though. So is there anything further on that? Yeah, and I'm sorry, I did get a second from, excuse me, from Deputy Chief Evans. So do I need one from Mr. Director?
He's the underlying motion. So
I see. For the amended motion, Director Zarenda, are you okay with that as well?
James Arenda for the
amendment?
record, yes, with the motion.
Okay, excellent. All right, then, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on forwarding the 2 names, Aloyan and Powers, to the governor? Any further discussion? All right, we got a roll call vote.
Chief Bays,
Yes.
Dr. Bradley,
Yes.
Chairman DeRico,
Yes.
Director Zorinda,
Yes.
Deputy Chief Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Grosnick,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Deputy Director Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Katsky,
Yes.
Dr. Lanterman,
Yes.
Mr. McCormick,
Yes.
Ms. Murray,
Yes.
Ms. Sousa Yamas,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ortlinker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brady,
Yes.
Chair Stiglitz.
Yes.
Did I miss anybody? I got a little disoriented in the roll. Okay, motion passes.
All right, so those are two of the three names, so then let's continue the discussion as to the third name. Kind of what has been discussed and some of the names that have been provided, just some other thoughts that I have. It's what, to me, obviously I'm one of the people who indicated Mr. White was in my top four because he's very impressive, having had experience with the federal system as well as the state. The federal system can inform what we do in the sense that they have what you can do if you have enough people and enough resources and low volume. So it's like, it's not a perfect world in corrections, but that's about as perfect a world as it can be when people can truly supervise somebody and get to know them and provide them services. So those are things that like high level kind of inform the goals that we have for what we do here. That said, on the kind of data thinkum policy piece, we have any number of exceptional corrections people here that with that deep experience that we can always draw on that are available to us. That kind of data piece and thinking policy academic piece I don't have. And so that's something that isn't as easy to draw on because it is it's a unique skill set. And so I think we do have some people, the two that we sent or that we're going to send. And that's where Ms. Joseph was certainly one of my names because just that education, that analysis piece is something that is more unique and less available, I think, to us in some ways. So there were just some thoughts I can apply to other candidates as well. I know Ms. Cafferata came up, who I have a much respect for and a lot of, she's inspirational in her career, her service to Nevada, and that. But with the data piece, that piece. I don't know that that's that has been something that she's had to lean into from a deep current policy perspective from actual implementation. Like I look at the items that are created and I share her awe. Like those are great dashboards. They are great dashboards. I would have no idea how to put that together, who could put that together. But I'm very impressed with that as I think she was. So I think in terms of her experience, I think the Ethics Commission's a very different commission leading that group than what we expect from the Sentencing Commission. And that's what I'm talking about, it being both an implementer and a generator. And so those are just some thoughts that I have.
This is Jennifer Lanterman for the record. With respect to Ms. Joseph, let me take a step back and focus on the position first, and then specifically my concerns with Ms. Joseph. So the Department of Sentencing Policy has staff who are excellent at what they do. But as an executive director, you're responsible ultimately for the product that your agency produces. And so you have to understand what they're generating. You have to be able to validate what they're producing. You need to be able to look back at their work, so to speak, and determine whether or not they did it the right way. Because you can get to an answer, it might not be accurate, right? You might have violated all sorts of analytical assumptions. Like all sorts of mashugas can happen with data. And so, as the executive director, you're responsible for that. So if you don't have a really strong understanding of research design, of data collection, of data analysis, where the gaps are, where people, play fast and loose with data, or whether, so there are a lot of problems there. And so as a person in this particular position, there are lots of administrative and managerial and relationship building requirements associated with the position. But at base, if you don't understand research design and data collection and analysis, it's really going to compromise your ability to ensure that the Department of Sentencing Policy is producing the best available data. With respect to Ms. Joseph, she actually has very limited research design and analytical experience. Like, if I'm familiar with her level of experience here, and it is not the level of experience I would be comfortable with an executive director in this position having, right? And so that is the same type of concern that I have with Mr. White, that's a really significant limitation in their background despite all the other benefits. And so if that's going to compromise the ability of the Department of Sentencing Policy to perform its tasks, then we've got a problem.
Jim Hoffman. So I like Ms. Joseph better out of those candidates. I think one important piece of it is she was talking about in her research experience, it's about the difference in perceptions between researchers and police agencies and then the public. And I think that's an important thing for us to consider, because the point of us generating all of this data isn't just to have the data. It's so that the data can be used by people in the legislature, can be used by courts, it can be used by members of the public. So it's not just about gathering the data, it's about understanding how to communicate that data out to people who don't have criminal justice system experience necessarily. So I think that is a point in her favor. The other kind of point I would make in response to what Dr. Lanterman was just saying, I agree with the concerns that she has, but I think that Ms. Joseph is maybe better suited to grow into that role. She's still a doctoral candidate, so she'll get her doctorate, compared to Mr. White, who's already had a very extensive career doing something that doesn't involve this sort of data collection. So I would support Ms. Joseph over Mr. White.
Evie Grosnick, I just wanted to follow up on that because I agree 100% with Dr. Lanterman, and that's why I asked if we had to send 3. So I guess my question would actually be for you, Dr. Lanterman. Was there anyone else on that list that you felt would have more of the data integrity research, education, training, or experience that would be relevant to the role besides Ms. Joseph?
This is Jennifer Lanterman for the record. My preference would be that the interpretation of the directive to us would be that we don't have to send 3 candidates forward to the governor.
Evie Grosnick again, and I do just want to point out my concern with some of the candidates and the lack of data is that we did spend time figuring out what we wanted to be minimum qualifications versus preferred experience or preferred traits. And so we did include understanding of criminal justice data collection and analysis as one of those criteria that we really want to have. And I think that's for a good reason, for the reasons that Dr. Lanterman said. So I just wanted to add that in.
This is Dr. Bradley. Can I make a quick comment about Megan McCoy? I can't remember who brought her up. I was excited about her experience looking at her resume, given what was mentioned, her Legislative Counsel Bureau. She lists some of the data involvement that she's had with collection, training people, putting together reports. However, she said very little about that in her presentation and even in the questions that were posed of her. So I think I felt a little bit confused about that. I'm kind of struggling myself to find a third person. I don't know what our options are. If second interviews are an option, if we have to generate 3, another round of applications. I guess I'm just not really sure what the options are for where we go from here.
Jim Hoffman again. Just want to jump in here. I pulled up the statute. This is NRS 176.01323, subsection 2. The executive director of the department must be appointed by the governor from a list of 3 persons recommended by the Sentencing Commission. So to me, it doesn't sound like we have discretion. It sounds like it has to be 3. Leave that up to everybody else.
Christine Jones Brady for the record. One thing I want to point out too is that this is a team, and so there may be things that. So we have a deputy director and a director. So if Ms. Powers gets the director spot, we still have a deputy director that can be filled. If someone else gets the director spot, Ms. Powers is deputy director. If she decides to leave, then the director can still choose someone that has good experience in data. So I'm thinking of this from more of a holistic standpoint, that if we were to send 3, it is a team, and that as a team, they can ensure that it's a well-rounded team with somebody, at least somebody on the team that has good data experience. Just wanted to point that out.
Senator?
This is David Orentlicker. I'd like to comment on Ms. Joseph. And I was surprised, so maybe Dr. Lanterman could elaborate on her concern about Ms. Joseph's data collection and analysis skills. That seems something I would expect to be integral to her PhD work, and one of her references specifically comments on her immersion in data as part of her PhD. So I thought that was actually would be one of her strengths.
This is Jennifer Lanchman for the record. So at this point, Ms. Joseph is a doctoral candidate. She has not defended her prospectus yet. So she has a lot of theoretical understanding of research design, execution of research, theoretical understanding of data collection, may have learned data analysis skills, has not actually independently executed those tasks, right? She is in the process of developing something called a prospectus, which is a dissertation proposal, right? So at this point, the proposal hasn't even been accepted, and so she's not actually doing that work. I think it's important to Mr. Hoffman's point that somebody is thinking about what is the relationship between what we understand information, how we understand phenomena from the academic side and how the public understands those things. So I think that understanding of the work that the department would be doing is important. But again, she's not actually done those things, right? She's not actually gone out and talked to anybody yet. None of these things have happened. So this is all theoretical. And so, if earlier Deputy Chief Evans highlighted concerns about practical experience, right? If you're only learning about something in a classroom, but you haven't actually done the implementation, well, now we've got a disconnect, right? So you might have somebody who's learning about research design and data collection and analysis, but that's different than actually having done it and found out all the ways those things go wrong when the rubber meets the road, and like how you have to adjust, right? So with every candidate, I think there's some strengths and some drawbacks. If we're going to adopt this perspective of the department as a team. And if you've got some people on that team who are strong in terms of data already, if, using Vice Chair Brady's example, if Ms. Powers were to stay in the deputy director position and she's got, strong skills there, then you might want somebody in an executive director position who's got strong management experience, right? So my concern with Ms. Joseph is where exactly is she strong in this case, right? She is not particularly strong when it comes to research design, data collection, analysis. She's not particularly strong when it comes to administration or management, right? So she is a candidate with some strengths relative to other candidates, but she, from my perspective, they're not necessarily qualities in her background that set her apart from other candidates.
Michelle Bays for the record.
Some
So I just wanted to add that if you look at her experience, she's also not able to apply them in any of the positions that she's either held or is in now.
Franklin Katchke for the record. I agree with much of what Dr. Lanterman has said regarding Ms. Joseph. And to Ms. Brady's point, if we're looking, again, at a holistic approach regarding building a team, I think then my third preference would be Ms. Cafferata, just given her experience, her connections throughout the state, and her history working as an executive director with the Nevada Commission of Ethics. I think she'd be able to build a decent team, even though she, I guess, is also light in the data analytics portion of her resume. So that would be my, I guess, suggestion for the third person.
James Arenda for the record. One thing that I want to just mention, when you're looking at some of the backgrounds of some of these individuals, if you look at even Todd White, he did have implementation processes that he was put a team together for reentry court, and he was a policy writer. When you're talking about data and getting information from agencies, it's easy to get the data and ask for them, but you got to know what you're asking for and how it impacts. Having somebody that understands how the sentences impact reentry, how the arrests and those that are the violent crimes, the less violent crimes impact somebody being returned to the community and getting rehabilitation and all that. To me, that was my strongest factor with Todd White, and I think that's what we really need in a sentencing division, is really understanding those impacts and what information and data you got to ask for, because you do understand someone that had this type of a background that understands how it affects individuals being re-entered back into society, those that have been arrested on certain charges, long-term, short-term, mandatories, all those things you would have to understand when you're developing a re-entry team, which he has done for the courts. So that was, I thought, was the biggest point with Todd, that isn't data driven, but it's understanding what data will mean when you are looking for things that are going to impact the community.
Thank you. Any further comments? Anyone else want to weigh in? If not, I'll.
Yeah, this is
yes. Go ahead, Senator. Sorry.
Sorry, and maybe back to Ms. Joseph, maybe, is this something, Dr. Lanterman, you said her having not even done a prospectus, and maybe, is that something she said that I just forgot she mentioned? When I looked at her resume, it says she lists next July as the expected date of her PhD, which suggests she's pretty well along. So is that something that came out in some other place, or?
Yes, this is Jennifer Lanchman for the record.
How
she referenced this in her comments.
Is the resume just inaccurate?
Oh, sorry, this is Jennifer Lanchman for the record. She referenced this in her comments. So when she said, I asked her something to the effect of, okay, that's great. What have you found? Have you studied this, right? And so I haven't done that yet, right? So let's just say, for the sake of the argument, the prospectus has been defended and approved. Nothing's actually happened, right? So there's no implementation of those skills, right? We don't know like how she'd done this and found out, oh my gosh, trying to actually talk to people and figure out what they think is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be when I read it in such and such textbook, right? Or, you know, now I have this problem with all these data because they're not saying what they should be saying, or I can't get a sufficient sample, or I'm having all these issues, right? So none of this research has actually happened. We don't know what her skills look like in application.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion?
Christine Jones Brady for the record. I know nobody else mentioned Donald Poole, but I did want to, just for the record, say that I still think he was a good candidate as well. He has the experience of working in pretrial and working in law enforcement, and has the experience of working in rural Nevada, which I think we have a lot of challenges in rural Nevada. And so I think that his perspective and his leadership could benefit too, but I'm not going to push it. I was the only one that mentioned him. And I also do want to say for the record, I was initially excited about Megan McCoy, and I was a little confused that all the answers, as much as I love horses, that it really all revolved around that work that didn't seem to quite fit. But I did want to make a comment because I know that Evans was also thinking of her. Thank you.
Michelle Bays for the record. Ms. Cafaretta's name came up, and then the discussion about Nevada and knowing what questions to ask. That is absolutely true. It is very important when you're dealing with data, is knowing what to ask. Out of all of the candidates, I think Ms. Cafaretta absolutely knows Nevada and where our history is with the system so in depth that, you know, that I think it would be a very good possibility for that third candidate. She certainly does know those questions and challenges in the history.
Further discussion? All right, does anyone want to make a motion?
Jim Hoffman, I move that Delana Joseph be the third name that we submit.
John McCormick, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this motion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Chief Bays?
No.
Dr. Bradley?
No.
Chairman Dorico?
No.
Director Zorinda?
No.
Deputy Chief Evans?
No.
Ms. Grosnick?
No.
Mr. Hoffman?
Might be the only yes, but yes.
Deputy Director Jordan?
No.
Mr. Katsky?
No.
Dr. Lanterman?
No.
Mr. McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
No.
Ms. Susayamas?
No.
Assemblyman Ortlinker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brady?
No.
Chair Stiglich?
Yes.
Motion fails.
This is Chris Dorico. I'd like to make a motion that the third name included to the list of Ms. Aloyan and Ms. Powers be Mr. White.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
James Arenda. Oh, sorry, too quick. James Arenda, second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Chief Bays,
Yes.
Dr. Bradley,
Yes.
Chairman DeRico,
Yes.
Director Zarinda,
Yes.
Deputy Chief Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Grosnick,
No.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Deputy Director Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Katsky,
No.
Dr. Lancherman,
Yes.
Mr. McCormick,
No.
Ms. Murray,
No.
Ms. Susiyamas,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ortlicker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brady,
Where are we number-wise? If he doesn't pass, will we then vote for Caffaretta? No?
Be free to make another motion. Or if this vote fails, then it would, I'm sorry, this is Lydia Stiglich for the record. If this vote were to not pass, then it would be open to the commission to further discuss or recommend a third name.
I'll vote yes.
Chair Stiglich.
No.
Motion passes.
All right. Then thank you for the hard work on that and the discussion. Director Gonzalez will prepare our recommendations and submit them to the governor's office. And robust discussion doesn't mean, again, I start out how grateful I am that we had so many good candidates. So I think it's wonderful, and now we will leave it to the discretion of the governor to then decide who will lead this agency on his behalf. So I want to thank you. We'll close this agenda item. We'll turn then to item 7, discussion of potential topics and dates for future meetings. As we wait to hear from the governor on the appointment of our director, at this time, I'm going to ask that Deputy Director Powers serve as our acting director. I will meet with her and her staff to schedule the next meeting to keep our efforts going until the governor determines who will be the new director. And staff will let you know as soon as we have that scheduled. Meanwhile, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to be considered for future meetings? Of course.
Victoria Gonzalez for the record. I just wanted to mention that I'm inviting the candidates, all of them, including especially the ones who, the names we're going to move forward, to a very, very informal, I'll call it reception at the office immediately following this meeting, so that will be an aspect for them to take into consideration if they were offered the appointment, and then consider that when accepting. So I'd invite the members of the commission here up north. If you're around, would like to stop by the office, would be nice to have you. I'll plan on being there till about 1:30 if you'd like to stop by and just to convene after. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Anyone, any items at this time you'd like to have for future discussion? Or certainly, if you think of something later, reach out and let us know. Dr. Bradley?
I have one.
Sure.
I've brought some of these topics up before, but we don't have to get into specific details at this moment necessarily, but I still would like to take a look at mental health in our system and look at some data points we could potentially track, especially as it applies to people coming out of the forensic psychiatric hospitals and going into the prison, and the tracking that goes from there all the way through to release in terms of services, recidivism, various different data points.
All right, thank you. Any other further items? All right, hearing none, we'll close item 7, turn to item 8. I'll open the second period of public comment. Is there anyone in Carson City or Las Vegas who wishes to make public comment? Please.
Commission members, I know you've been here for a while, and so I'll make this very brief and short. My name is Kirk Widmar. I'm the current chief or the administrator for the Offender Management Division for the Department of Corrections. And I would be remiss not to take this opportunity to express some gratitude towards Director Gonzalez in her efforts in pushing better criminal justice reform forward for the state as a whole. I've been in the position now just shy of 2 years, and during the interim and then this legislative session, got to work with Victoria and her team extremely close. And the data-driven product that allowed for unanimous votes out of both House and Assembly and the success of the desires of this commission is a direct reflection of those efforts. It is my hope that the commission will continue in that motion. The department will continue in that motion of data-driven, nonpartisan approach to what is the best efforts for the department, what is the best efforts for our partners in parole and probation and in parole board and the other members of the criminal justice system. And so just with great gratitude to you, Victoria, it's been a pleasure to work with you. It's an honor, and boss, hopefully I didn't say anything that gets you in trouble. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Is there any further public comment in Carson City? Hearing none. In Las Vegas?
No one up here.
All right, thank you. I'll ask BPS, is there anyone on the line for public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you. We'll then close that second period of public comment. And before we adjourn, now is the time when commission members, thank you, can say thank you to Director Gonzalez, who has been exceptional. I don't consider her as moving on. I consider her as moving over. So she's moving somewhere else, and we intend to draw upon all her new experiences, contacts, expertise, and further the important work and the incredible work that she and her team have done here. So thank you.
It's Christine Jones-Brady for the record. I just want to express my appreciation. I've enjoyed working with you, and I think you've done an amazing job at getting this department up and running from nothing. And so congratulations to you, and wish you all the best. And I hope that your comment that you're going to stay in touch, that you keep that promise.
John McCormick for the record. I would echo everything everyone else has said, and Victoria has certainly been a pleasure to work with and collaborate with, and to see her sort of raise the Sentencing Commission from nothing to what it is now. And I would also just like to say that if she can take one thing away, it's the fact that I can understand good time credits now. I have not been able to for, I don't know, like 15 years, but now they make sense with that bill. So I really appreciate it.
This is Chris Dorico, and I certainly want to thank Victoria for the friendship and the times we've had. You know, as chairman of the parole board and working directly with her, you know, we've had very good relationship, work together. We've butted heads as well. We've done all of this, but that's what it truly should be. And we have this discussion about we're all trying to do what we believe is best for this state. And through the good times, the bad times, everything is gone. We know that the relationship and everything is there is all for the good of the state. And I want to thank you for always being professional with that, and to know and trying to see all sides of the viewpoint, and really working together with all the agencies. So thank you so much.
Aaron Evans for the record. Victoria, it's been a pleasure. Those three names that we submitted today have some huge shoes to fill. It's going to be hard. I do not envy them to have to stand up to what you've said, but you've been fantastic to work with. You've, I think, taken the concerns of everybody, you know, and worked on finding those compromises when people didn't agree. And I think we put out a really good work product, and you're a huge part of that, and you'll be missed for sure.
Thank you so much. I think you know, because of what the nice words were just said, I sincerely love you so much. This has been a dream job. Before this, I felt really lost, you know. My resume is all over the place. I just have this passion to help people in the criminal justice system. And this commission took a chance on me because of my enthusiasm. It's interesting listening today because of where we've evolved. I'm not a researcher. I'm a lawyer. And I think it shows that there's opportunity for growth. But this, like I said, and what Chief Justice Stiglitz said about, I really do see this relationship evolving. We're just moving on to a new phase of this relationship. And I can't thank you enough. Again, this is a dream job. And I think those are the shoes to fill, is live up to being this kind of role in this position. And Chief Whitmar, thank you for what you started. If you knew what we went through this session and the partnership to really bring some real change to the state that people won't even realize they're benefiting from. And that's just the start. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for what comes next for all of you. And you're not done with me, and please reach out anytime because of my affection for you. It's sincere. And thank you. And I wish you well, and I know I'm going to see you again. Thank you.
And we are adjourned.